Welcome, welcome. We are so glad to see you, have you here, seeing some faces that I know, some faces that I don't know. We always want to at least have people feel like they are connected in some way. And so if you would share your name, where you're logging in from, just so that we can see who's on with us. And I always like the question, and Courtney, this seems like something you might like. What's bringing you joy?
I literally just facilitated a week ago and asked that exact question. So we're on the same page.
It's a goodie. So go ahead and share your name, where you're coming in from, and what's bringing you joy. We'll give a little moment while we do this to let either audio come in and or um, any other bodies that are going to join us. And then I'll start. Hey, Sandra. Great to see you here. Awesome. Hey, Kristen. This is great. So I'm going to start us with our overview so we still have some time just as people are sharing via the chat. Let me find my screen and let's see if this comes up okay. Does that work? Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So I imagine we have some returners and some LeaderShape families, some facilitators. So some of this that I'm going to share is not going to be new to you, and it's always great to hear. So welcome. How we're going to use the platform today is that we'll ask you to do comments and questions in the chat area. And so this is more like a webinar, even though we are on Zoom and you have access to sound and all that good stuff. We'll post really one poll and we'll do it via Mentimeter just to get some insights. But please, we want to keep the chat going so that we do feel like that we are engaging with you. If you have a question, I am serving as both the moderator and the discussant, if you will. And if you don't want to share it publicly via chat, just write me and I can get it into the conversation. Next, we want to share our land acknowledgement, and we have that as not only as just important through our community at LeaderShape, just really important in our work. And it's not, I always hold it that I think, you know, when the United States started doing land acknowledgements, campuses, sometimes they can come off very like, okay, this is the next box to check. And we want to make sure that we don't do that and that we really take these words in and also kind of ground this acknowledgement in the work that we're doing. What's the connection? How are we making meaning of this as we do our work today? So I'll read it for you and you take it in the way that you're able. LeaderShape would like to begin this presentation by acknowledging that the land each of us is on today is the original homelands of Indigenous and tribal nations. We acknowledge the painful history of genocide and forced removal from these territories, and we honor and respect the many diverse Indigenous peoples still connected to this land. Please honor and acknowledge the Native and Indigenous people from the land that you are on, or that you're joining us from, and give thought to your ancestry and the generations that came before you. And so I am on Lenape land, and I'm out in Brooklyn, New York. And recognizing that Indigenous folks, like the experience of the Indigenous people were actually, some were very mobile and moved. We recognize that our construction of static land and ownership may not be what actually is acknowledged in this land acknowledgement. And so hold that in your mind as well, that when we talk about land ownership, that was not the reality actually. And so we can hold that the earth, the indigeneity of all the peoples that were here before any kind of colonization and genocide may have held their relationship to the land differently. Courtney, do you want to share your location?
Yes, I've got, I was deep in that joy of chat that's going on. I was like, all of the joy is bringing me a lot of joy. So I am in Denver, Colorado, which is the traditional territory of the Ute, Cheyenne, and Arapaho, as far as I am aware of, and as far as we are aware of right now. And I'm really so excited to be here and sharing space with all of you, and just always and forever appreciate Tanya's intentionality and making these things that can become familiar and repetitive feel really special and important each time that we do them. So
thank you. All right, so LeaderShape. If you're new to the LeaderShape family, our vision is a just, caring, and thriving world where all lead with integrity and a healthy disregard for the impossible. And the way that we do that is by transforming the world by increasing the number of people who lead with integrity and a healthy disregard for the impossible. And so we do that in a variety of programs, and we'll share more about those programs at the end of our session. But I did want to share our LeaderShape definition. And this is how LeaderShape defines leadership. And I want to just name, since we have Courtney here, Courtney really helped us crystallize this a little bit more. If you have been around before, you probably remember we had a very lengthy definition of leadership, good and lengthy. But Courtney assisted us in our most recent update of the Institute curriculum, and we worked together for this definition. Leadership is the practice of co-creating a more just, caring, and thriving world through living uniquely with integrity. And so partially because she's here, I'm glad I got to say that. And I'm just generally glad she's here, because it has been a joy to get to work with her. And we're going to talk about possibility. And who doesn't like a conversation about possibility? So do you want to tell folks more about who you are, Courtney, before we get started?
Yes, I would love to. I feel like every conversation I have with Tanya is a conversation about possibility. So I'm excited for a public conversation with Tanya about possibility. Hi, everyone. I am Courtney. I got connected to LeaderShape 10 years ago when I cluster facilitated while I was working at the University of Oregon. Fell in love, as many of us do, and always thought I'd come back around. And my most recent coming back around was helping with the Institute curriculum and really re-envisioning what that is. And through that experience, Tanya and I connected, bonded, felt very kindred in a lot of ways. And I think this idea of possibility and hope was the through line of that connection. And so when it came to re-envisioning the Living in Possibility curriculum for LeaderShape, Tanya asked me to join her in that, and just stoked all of these things that I knew were in me, but I haven't really like expressed or like gotten a chance to kind of concretize is not the right word, but make more tangible, put some more like words and thoughts to, and like, what actually do we think possibility is? And I hope that in this conversation that we have today, this inspires you to have this conversation with folks in your life, because I think that is living in possibility, is like, what is possibility to you? And like, what keeps you from it, or what draws you to it? Or yeah, how can we practice that? And I know that's going to come out our version of that in this conversation, but I think hopefully you all feel inspired in some way to have this conversation with the folks in your life as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Courtney. And the cool thing about stoking like energy is it was really great to meet a kindred so that we could like just grow it together. And we hope that you get some of that in our conversation. We first want to hear from you about how you defined possibility. And so I am going to put up a Mentimeter. And I also am having this moment of like, we could skip the Mentimeter and go straight for the chat. And so I'm going to ask the question. It's going to be a QR code. Don't worry about the QR code. Let's just read the chat a little bit. How do you define possibility? And go ahead and put your response in the chat. How do you define possibility? And I will say, as you're chatting, I don't know. I think, and Courtney, you and I can have this conversation. I think when we started talking, it was sort of like, how do we define it? It's not like, it's just possibility, right? It was a fun start to a conversation.
Yeah, it's exactly right. It was my favorite, one of my favorite parts of like, we're designing a whole curriculum around possibility and we both just feel it. And I think being able to put some, as I was saying before, like some words, some tangibility to it was one of the most fun parts of doing this curriculum with you and doing this with you is like, so I'll share a little bit about what came out of that conversation. And I'm a person that loves to get like as elemental as possible. And so I remember in one of our conversations, Tanya said, options? Like, and like there was like kind of a little like hesitancy, like it should be more complicated, right? Like, and I was like, yeah, no, that's exactly what it is. It's difference, it's options, it's other, it's alternative, you know, and again, that's the very elemental way of looking at it. And then I was like, where the whole thing started to shift was like, but practicing possibility, like what is that? And that to me was when I don't know, things got exciting of like opening up and being with difference or other or options. Like that's the work. So I'll pause there, but that I feel like it's when it was like, oh yes, the fact that difference and other and options feel so threatening to so many of us is maybe a crux at least of why living in possibility feels like a challenging thing to do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I do remember that conversation too. And it is that kind of thing of like, oh, we just do it. But much like any of the other stuff that I just do, or actually this is slightly different, but any of the other stuff like facilitation or navigating triggers, I'm in practice so much, I sometimes forget that I actually learned it. Mm-hmm. And I say that this is slightly different because I actually think we were born into the world in possibility and with possibility. And it has been, we've unlearned it. And so to actually, like you said, to kind of bring some meat, I don't like that reference, to bring some grounding to it, to have it be in practice, that's what we're having to relearn, particularly in the frame and context of the world that we're in. Yeah. I want to get some of the ones, I know that people are probably reading the chat, but I definitely want to get some in. Vernon's got hope and courage. Tracy, openness, hope, optimism. Danielle, you were with me and the options. Hopefulness, from Sandra. I love this one. What we could be with enough time and attention. Yes, yes. Snaps.
Yeah. And Abby's perfectly follows up with like an elaboration of that afterwards.
Yeah, removing ourselves from the structure of how things should be and leaning into what could be. And I love that one because I think the curriculum helps us actually do that. That we don't realize the process to actually move from a should to a could. And there's what you have done, Courtney, is actually brought that into clear processes and practices that make it available to us. I want to also name that this is, I said yesterday on Wednesday in our LeaderShape staff meeting that I wanted this to be a gentle commercial for the Living in Possibility program, because I so believe that it is necessary. Like if, you know, we could just have this available, set up on the street corner and, you know, delivering it everywhere we could. Our world right now, the United States, our campuses, our students, our staff need to understand that possibility is a tool that we should all have in our tool bag. And even more so, it can be a lens that we just wear all the time that moves us more towards liberation.
Yeah, I'm a comment in the chat kind of person. So I'm curious. That was a question that I had going into this, was why possibility matters to people. I love hearing how we define it. And I especially love Will brought in curiosity, which I think you'll find present later when we start to talk about this model that we kind of dreamt up. But I'm curious if people don't have too much chat fatigue, also why it matters to you. Like, why do you care to talk about possibility, to learn about possibility? Yeah, why it matters.
That's a good question. It's a really good question. Feel free to drop some reflections in the chat. I always think about, this feels like radio to me, since we're not actually engaging conversation. So I'm like, oh, radio silence. Radio silence is okay.
Yeah. Yeah. We are practicing holding space, which again, lots of foreshadowing to the model that we'll talk about later.
Yep.
Spaciousness. We can also, okay.
No, I'm fine taking the time. It's great.
I see possibilities exciting because it allows for dreaming and creativity. Because without possibility, we are stuck. Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Like Tanya said, when you've been working into something for so long, you forget that there are other possibilities to accomplish something. Yes. Mm-hmm. I'm finding more and more our current college students are way beyond where we think they are and what we project onto them. Oh, yes, I learned that lesson every day. I think they hold a lot at once.
Yeah.
And it creates space for a bigger table. Yeah.
What I'm getting from these conversations and the definition, I don't like the comment of preaching to the choir, but what I get is that we have a lot of possibility thinkers on this call with us, which is awesome and fun. And it allows for us to potentially take this a little bit deeper. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll just read these last two here. Abby, as we evolve and grow and learn, our options do also. Possibility helps us discover and consider those options. I love discover. Yeah. Okay. It matters, Juan, it matters to me for self-accountability reasons. I notice how much I hope I have for a better world, but also lots of pessimism about its feasibility. Possibility is a push. Yes. I think it's okay to name that, like, possibility matters to a lot of us because we just don't like what's happening right now. Like, it's just not, this isn't it. Like, we know that better, different can happen. Like, it's just what we are experiencing is not enjoyable, pleasurable, humane, whatever it is. Like, I think, yeah, that's I'm giving myself permission that's an okay reason to be in possibility.
Absolutely. And so I want to ask a question, Courtney. When have you used possibility lately?
Tanya always asks me a casual question and then it like hits me right in the chest. Oh boy. I'm going to be honest, I've been needing a lot of possibility, intentional possibility lately. And part of that does stem from there's just some things in my life I don't like right now, and I don't like how they're going, and some hard things in family. And so there's this, this feeling of, I think what I like about how I now think about possibilities. It used to feel like such a heady thing. I have to get myself, it used to feel like an inhale. I have to my way to possibility, and I have to hold my breath to be in possibility. And there's like some sort of delusional or disconnected quality about it. Like I have to, and now possibility feels more and more like an exhale, like a sinking in to what feels true around me, which is that change is like, I don't know another way to say that, but I have experienced now enough times that things change. And I believe, to some degree at least, I have an influence in that change. Still figuring out how much influence and to what degree. But I guess all that to say is that possibility, living in possibility now feels like a grounded next step rather than a disconnected vision is wonderful. Anyone in the LeaderShape loves vision, right? I don't have to talk about that, but it does feel nice to be like, all right, in this conversation that I have with my family tomorrow, I might just ask a different question. I might just say, well, is that the way that it has to be? Or could there be something else? Or like, yeah, it feels a little bit more mundane than it ever has.
So beautifully said, Courtney. And I will never apologize for asking a good question. It's when I get a chance to, when someone meets me with a real answer, it's always the gift. So thank you. Thank you for that. I will join you in the intention of possibility. And I think that that's something that is misunderstood. One of my favorite made up sayings is Pollyanna was a badass.
Yeah.
And I say that because Pollyanna, I think, was my actual first teacher of what possibility is. And I will always love her. I will not love that original movie. If you go watch the original Pollyanna, it is quite ableist and quite a lot of things. And the character of Pollyanna, we give her a bad name because we'll say things like, oh, don't be so Pollyanna. And so that tells us that possibility is often poo-pooed in our society. If you watch the movie, and there's another version called Polly with little Rudy from the Cosby Show, watch that one too. Pollyanna always chose into possibility. She wasn't like just this flighty little child moving around going, oh, this is believe this about the possibility, or this could be happening in your life. She actually chose into it every time. And she teaches us in that movie how she learned to choose into. Her father actually taught her possibility. And I think the choice you see, yes, it's a movie, it's a Disney movie, but it influenced the experience of those around her. And I will say, I'll answer my own question, Courtney, that I have so gratefully, deeply leaned into possibility by choice in a recent cancer diagnosis. And I'll use a up to date, up to the moment example. Yesterday was my first chemotherapy treatment. And I have shared with people the story that we have about cancer this very much is someone's example and experience. And so I'm not lessening the experience of cancer. And I wanted to hold the possibility of a lot of things. I didn't want to zero in on okay, that is going to be my cancer experience. So I have actually told people, if you have your own experience or you've watched others, I'm going to, including my mother. My mother is a 2-time breast cancer survivor, and that was my diagnosis. I have told my mother, please let that be your experience. It is not mine. And so I want to have my experience, and I want to live in the possibility of what my experience could be. And so when I learned, it was a slight change, that my first chemotherapy treatment would be yesterday, and I knew that I had this today, I wrote Kristen and Courtney and said, so don't know what it'll look like, hoping for the best, believing in the chance to actually be with you all. And I've never been in the experience of receiving 3 chemo drugs and pre-medications and everything. So we'll see. But the possibility existed in the we'll see. I stayed open. It was that openness. Yeah. And so when I woke up this morning and there was no nausea, I've been taking care of me. You'll see me drink lots of water. If I go running off the screen, I probably have to go to the bathroom. That created all the space for me to be okay and write them and say, hey, y'all, I'll be here today. And that to me is the beauty of possibility. Can we live and stabilize our bodies and regulate our bodies in all of the options that potentially exist? I think we sometimes get really, I got it, and believe me, I have some control issues. I got to know what's going to happen. And so I'll write the story this big when the story is actually as big as this room, what the possibilities are, but can I live in the broadness and the wideness of all the possibility? And I say yes, because this right here is too small. Yeah. So let's, you want to define living in possibility, or have another thought?
Yeah, I have a question for you that maybe we can pin for later, because I don't know if it's the perfect time, but I heard lots of things in what you shared, and I'm glad you shared. And one of the questions that I have that I still, I don't know, I struggle with, sounds dramatic, but I'm not so sure of yet. And I think this comes up a lot with folks, is the relationship between choice and possibility. And at some point, I would love to hear your understanding of that and relationship to it, because it's not about not making choices. It's not about not choosing. Like I think about you choosing to do chemotherapy at some point. You made that choice to some degree. And that didn't mean that I don't know, it always seems so finite, right? Once you make the choice, then it's over, or like then it all closes down, rather than seeing choosing as actually more of an opening.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Yeah.
I could do a short version of the answer. We're gonna have a whole nother conversation about that at another time. The short version of the answer is, think about choice in this versus choices available to me in possibility, which is I'm having this room represent possibility. And so this is possibility too, because I didn't just hold up one finger and say, this is all I have. Possibility exists in between my hands, but it's so much smaller. Possibility like this, there are multiple possibilities that exist here. But when I open more broadly and can hold that, there aren't only this many choices to choose from, but this many choices, at some point, I am going to make a decision, which then opens up to a new set of possibilities.
Yeah.
That's the beauty to me. I'm like, oh yeah, I will. That choice, that agency that I have gets kind of enlivened to then open up to a new set of possibilities, because yes, I had the choice of not doing chemo, of going, food in a different, more natural way without chemical drugs. Once I made that decision, I then got to broaden my experience to say, okay, so how do I want my chemo journey to look? Once I made that decision, how do I, it just keeps, to me, it's a way opening.
Yeah.
And I love way openings.
Yeah. And I think well, I keep saying we're going to get to the model. I swear we're going to get to the model. One of the parts of that, I think, is exactly what you said when you were sharing, is like discerning what story is informing that choice. And that's what makes it potentially limiting or not to us. It's like, where's this choice coming from?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's share the definition that we're using for living in possibility. Do you want to read it, Courtney?
Sure. Okay, I'm gonna, as I lose my voice, I'm going to, maybe give some context or like separate these things a bit. But so living in possibility existed as a LeaderShape program before.
Yep.
And pros and cons was that it was filmed or recorded because it was virtual. And so I got to watch a lot of those sessions, which was amazing. And I got to hear a lot of the reasons why students and facilitators felt like they couldn't live in possibility or practice possibility. And I kind of put it into these 3 myths, if you will, some of which we've already talked about, which is the idea of like being delusional. Again, I have to be disconnected. I have to be somehow not in touch with reality. I have to be invincible. Like I cannot feel emotions or have reactions to what's going on. And then I have to like be exceptional in some way. I have to have all of the resources. I have to have all of the answers. I have to be this visionary person. And so from hearing those 3 myths, this way of looking at it came to be, with the underlying kind of beliefs that I was saying earlier, that change is, and that I have some sort of influence in that. So the beginning of the definition then was born from that, is that living in possibility is embracing the belief that a person, situation, experience, etc., can be different. And we have influence in that change process through our agency. So we got that belief, and then we went to, now how? How do we do it still? And it is a practice of creating space within ourselves, our relationships, and our lives. So different options have the opportunity to arise, be noticed, and be chosen. Again, kind of tapping into that idea that possibility exists, and it's the practice, the work is actually opening up and being able to notice and choose those things. And then the result of this belief and practice is seeing and going beyond limitations, unencumbered by how things are supposed to be, embodying hope, and enabling us to lead.
Letting that settle in a little bit. So I haven't said this yet. We definitely want your questions and your thoughts as we go. And so please, if you have any questions or insights, I would ask the question of the community gathered. How does this land on you? Do you see this as and I love the belief, practice, and result pieces of it, because a lot of stuff that we do starts first in our mind. And so the things that we believe, we actually live out, and it produces some kind of lived result. We often believe things that are limiting, and we've been socialized into those beliefs. And so our practices, our behaviors, our ways of being sometimes show up as limiting. And the results sometimes are things that we actually don't like. In fact, we look around the world, it's like, oh yeah, this is not going the way we wanted it to. But we don't recognize always that it started first in belief. And so in the same way, how does this practice of living in possibility land with you? I'll give a moment for folks to share via chat. And I will say, I think much like any other practice, and Courtney, tell me where you agree, disagree, would comment differently. Living in possibility, now I don't recognize how, like, I would have never decided or said that my experience of going through this cancer journey was I chose into possibility. It has become a way that I function in the world. And so it doesn't feel as much like I am choosing into. But I know there was a point when I did, like, I'm going to work at doing this. Do you feel like, and you've just said it, like, Courtney, do you feel like that is something that comes easily to you, or do you notice how much you have to choose into it?
Mm-hmm. I want to hear, I feel like you just said that there was a moment that you felt like you chose or you started to choose. Is that what you were?
Yeah. And I think it's about in general in life. I think I noticed, much like Juan said earlier, I noticed, and I believe me, please hear that I am still choosing around very specific things. One of the things I'm learning is like how much judgment moves through my mind. And so something that I'm doing is choosing possibility in regards to people. Like when I see someone that I have a judgment about, I invite possibility in this moment. What could be actually going on? What might this person? Yesterday, when I was taking the subway to my appointment, and I had this realization. I live in New York City. There are millions, quite literally millions of people that I pass every single day if I'm out in the city. And I had this realization. I'm like, nobody on this subway car knows that I'm going to a chemotherapy treatment. And then it hit me. It's like, oh, I don't know what any of them are going through or doing either. And there, this spot of openness and empathy and possibility just opened up for me in that moment. And so it's something that I'm still choosing into. And there are parts of my life, I think my orientation is possibility more now.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That part resonates with me. The orientation now goes that way. And yeah, this is just what's coming to me right now. It's like, I think I think it's both. Surprise. I think the answer is both. But I think that it is I've always been a critical questioning person. That feels true to me. That like I was never to my recollection, I've never been quite satisfied, with like a this is the way things are or here's how they need to be type of thing. But certainly, so to me, that in some ways is always practicing possibility. Whether that has an expansive intent or outcome, I think that's what's changed over time for me. It's like now that critical curiosity, we'll say, lends to more spaciousness than it ever has in the past, which to me feels more related to possibility, or at least the type of possibility I would like to practice. It has like a much more open feel to it than it used.
Yeah, I could identify and relate to that. Celine, thanks for bringing it in. I'm now even forgetting what my question was, or how this was landing on you. Celine says, to me, the thoughts we have of possibility remind me of hope, and the differences is in the action we take to live in possibility. to live in the possibility that this can be different. Maybe that can generate hope. Oh, I love that. Yeah. Yeah. And we often have hope as like the starter of a lot of things. Like, oh, I have to have hope in order to practice possibility. Possibility actually can engender hope. I love that. Yes. I hope this makes sense. Clearly it does. Thank you.
Yes. Celine, that resonates with me so much. And I think that, again, we could dissect these words, which frankly I would love to do. So if anyone wants to have a sidebar dissecting all of the words, I'd be into that. But I do think that there's a certain merriment of hope and expectation that happens, where like hope means I expect a certain thing to happen. And so I get my hopes up, or I hope for this outcome. And I how you're describing it, that the idea that things can be different makes me feel hopeful as like an energy rather than an outcome I am attached to, but I have an energy of hopefulness that to me feels more true and more helpful now.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I so identify with that. And that hope can be a thing by itself. I always tell my mom, who you can have your opinions, but I'm a person who every once in a while likes to play the lottery. And I don't know that I'm playing to win. Of course I'm playing to win. I want $1 million. And that lottery ticket is just a little bit of extra kind of hope. I always tell my mother, I'm like, I'm not buying this, because she always laughs at me because we know the odds of lottery winning is so low. It seems ridiculous. And I said, it's not, this is a piece of paid kind of experience of hope. Mm-hmm. And if I win, bonus. I'm just buying a little extra hope.
Yeah. And making that energy tangible. Like by doing that action, you were making it a little bit more tangible. Yeah. Yeah. I love that.
The model or the process.
Or so we did cover this, but I think we wanted to emphasize the practice part, because that's what the model really gets to, is like the how. So yeah, I think that's why we had that here.
Okay, good. So this is the model / process. So I think, that's what I did. So it's the practice of creating space within ourselves, our relationships, and we can only do that or the way that we're talking about doing it, what we teach in the curriculum is this model. So I'm going to give it back to you, Courtney. Can you talk us through this?
Sure. Yeah. So I'll first just say what's on the slide and then talk, and you can cut me off because I could keep talking. So this is, again, visually, I don't know if this is the perfect representation, but the idea of honoring what's real, expanding what can be, and grounding into what's true. Those being the quote unquote steps in this process. I don't know if any of you all listen to We Can Do Hard Things, Glennon Doyle's podcast, but in one of the episodes I was listening to recently, she was like talking about how when you have an idea, right, and you're like, this is, or there's something going on, you're like trying to make sense of it, and you're like, this could never, it just doesn't make sense, like there's no answers, there's no nothing, and then you get the like idea or the thought, and then once you share it, you're like, well, obviously everyone knows this is so dumb, and so I often find myself whenever about to share something, I'm like, it felt so challenging and like no one has ever solved this thing before, and then you say it out loud and you're like, okay, well, it's kind of just basic. So here we are. The honor, that was my own insecurity tangent, I guess. The honoring what's real goes to one of those myths that I was talking about earlier, about that idea of being delusional or disconnected, or I can't honor that reality kind of sucks right now for me in this situation or with these people or whatever it is. And I have a lot of emotions about that. So I'll give, I don't know, Tanya, do you want to like do a little mini exercise, or do you want to?
No, let's do that.
Okay. So I'll say this to you all. We'll do it in practice really briefly. So think of a situation in your life right now that is feeling sticky, stuck, like something that's you're not enjoying, you don't feel maybe a lot of hope around. I think as Celine brought that word in, that can be a good way to identify the place that we're not feeling so great about. So yeah, think for yourself around a situation that it's like the walls are feeling small or the box is feeling present. And what we would do in this instance, again, we'll do this really briefly, but first just naming that current reality. So you can take a second and bullet point, or again, just in your head, like, here's the reality of this situation. Tanya, I'm wondering if we want to give it we could keep, I know you so graciously shared your example that you're going in. I was going to try to think of something tangible, but
I could absolutely.
Yeah, let's ping pong. So if you were to just kind of like state kind of what feels real about the situation right now, what would you bring up?
Well, what actually got me through July, I'll stay with cancer diagnosis. Honoring what's real, what got me through July and August, my diagnosis came in July, was like, oh no, those those are images that are actually showing a tumor. And I think for me, it was one, I didn't look at the images every day, but it was a recognition of, oh, I don't get to act like this isn't present. I might not feel anything. I might feel wonderful every single day. Like physically, I was absolutely myself, but it didn't mean that something actually, a cancerous tumor wasn't in my body, that I didn't have cancerous cells. And so I needed to actually honor that. And I needed to honor the fact that, and I guess I've gotten a little bit into the grounding of what's true or not, that's not true. I've gotten into a little bit of the grounding of what's small t true. I'll think about it that way. But the honoring what's real, I started reading a book. Someone gave me a book on the history of breast cancer in the United States. And I got 3 chapters in, and then it got a little bit too much for me. It was talking about death rates, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to honor what's real. Is that I'm going to close this book and put it down, and kind of center in my own experience of what I actually want this to be.
Yeah, you've perfectly segued us into the next one. So the 2 parts of honor what's real are name the current reality, and then actually give yourself the space to feel those feelings about it. So in the curriculum with students, we have them write a letter to themselves, just allowing, we give them the emotion wheel, and they can name those emotions. And there's a lot of spaciousness in the curriculum to feel those things. And then as Tanya was getting into, the expand what can be is the part where we need to start discerning the story in what we just said. So we listed what's real, and now we need to review that and say, what's the story here, and whose story is it? And so I'll pause there. So that's the next part, is like, what's the story, and is it my story?
I love that question of whose story is it? Is it my story? Because I'm noticing in my process, like, so I'll say 2 things. One is that I have a beautiful and wonderful kind of friend, co-facilitator. We facilitate all the time. And one of the things that Barry and I did is, like, we have clients that we work with, and so we needed to be in contact with those clients, and we needed to send out an email to them to let them know, hey, this journey's going on. Before we ever wrote that email, Barry so beautifully said, so what actually do you want this journey to be like? And we sat there and brainstormed together, and I'm like, okay, I actually want joy in this. I actually want care. I want to be able to lean in. And so getting clear there first allowed for the writing of this email, but also the expansion showed up. The other piece that I want to highlight around expanding what could be is that I had to practice boundaries. And I picture it like, so I can have my experience that I want, but all of my loved ones and friends and the world, they will push up against my experience, like having to be smaller and smaller and smaller. And so early on my Caring Bridge site, I said, okay, everybody keep their stuff. I'm creating, I think of boundaries as a moat. I'm here, I have my boundaries that are a moat. I'm going to be clear about what I need from you. You can have all your stuff. Don't tell me about it. And so that allowed me to expand more, because if I have everybody pushing up on me, like the expansion is going to be kind of small. I can't expand if I don't actually know how to practice clear and communicative boundaries. And that has worked so beautifully. So I like the expand what can be, and I am recognizing how much boundaries supported me.
Yeah. Oh yeah, so you're perfectly segueing in, and I want to make sure that I keep circling back. And what I'm loving about this idea is so discerning the stories, whose are they? Seeking out new stories is also a part and a step in this expand what can be, because this is a we're gonna I want to get to it later, but this idea of limits, which is what you were just talking about. Part of honoring what's real is honoring that we are limited in some way. We exist in a body. We currently, right? The human experience is existing in a body. We might have access to these people, whatever they are. There are limits. And oftentimes, the limits that we create are rooted in real but not true. And so we'll get into the ground into what's true, but yeah, I guess I want to say that the idea of boundaries, creating new limits, intentionally creating new limits in these boundaries, again, from what, circling back to our beginning of our conversation, was like that choice opened up more space. Those boundaries open up more space. They let us tap into possibility in a different or new way. And so the expanding what can be, the other part of that is like opening up space or creating space. And I always think about that in a very physical way, like doing a dance or stretching or something like that. And I love adding boundaries to that list as another way that we can create space.
And I love what Juan just brought in, that we sometimes have boundaries as restrictive, and what can actually expand is us. Yeah.
Yeah, that feels like the crux of ground into what's true to me, which is the kind of final, if you will, step.
Yeah.
Is that we're going to ground into the truth of our expansive and thriving selves and the truth of life, which is that it changes. Again, from my experience, that's what I know to be true. And again, these limits exist and we are limited, but it's the limits that we imagine that often actually create the restrictive box.
Yeah.
Rather than the practice here that I would offer us all is to ground into our breath right now, which to me, again, cliche, but true, is a simple way to tap into those two things, that change is, and I have some influence in that change. So my favorite breath right now, I don't actually know if there's a name for it, I'm sure there is, but it is to, you breathe in again, and then long exhale. And I'll just invite us to do that a couple times. You can do it at your own pace, but just give us a little bit of that reconnection to perhaps truth or what is true. like you're breathing in as much as you can, and then you're kind of sucking a little bit more air in that second one, and then the long exhale. And that's a really simple and ongoing way for me to remember those truths, but also to distinguish between the what's real and what's true.
I also want to highlight, and Courtney, you did this so beautifully in the Institute curriculum, that is also about our body. It's hard to remember what's true when we are activated or dysregulated. And so it's parts of the Institute curriculum, parts of this curriculum has us reconnect to our body and use our body to remind our mind to come back to know some beliefs that where our previous beliefs might have been this big, it expands, it allows for our bodies to give that information. It's like it expands the beliefs that we can, kind of find and hold.
Yeah.
And I think that is so necessary, not only from, an everyday, but I think about students. Students need those opportunities because they live their days in their minds. Higher education, thankfully, I think it's expanding in different ways. It's showing up in some classrooms. But higher education has forefronted the mind. And the mind is great in everything. It doesn't need to run everything. Sometimes, like, the body needs to give us some information, or they need to work in relationship to each other. And so when I think about the possibility of this program on campuses, just makes me super excited. I am noticing the time. It is always a joy to get to talk to you, Courtney. And I'm like, oh crap, I gotta wrap some things up. So I just want folks to say thank you to Courtney for spending some time with us. And, again, any other comments that you want to offer in the chat, we welcome that. But I want to say also thank you to you for coming to the program, coming to the virtual conversations. Of course, we're going to do another set of these coming up. And I hope that you have enjoyed this week's conversations. Some important announcements. We always invite some partnership. If you haven't gotten a chance to experience any of our programs, they're delightful. And I know I'm totally skewed, and they're delightful. And so use this QR code to access our program guide to learn a lot more about our programs. And we have some merch on sale on our website. Thanks, Abby, for that link. Go on there. We have some t-shirts and merchandise. And I don't know that this is one that's on there, but one of the things is I love wearing LeaderShape merchandise out so I can get people not only to read it and live with a healthy disregard for the impossible, or ask me about it so that I can share more about LeaderShape. So, and then we have the Leadership Educator Symposium. That is coming up in December 13th through the 15th. Really great small group of folks who are able to really engage these conversations. And we're talking about liberatory learning in leadership education, really practicing as opposed to having it in theory. So definitely take a look at that. All right. Thank you again for your presence. And we'll hopefully see you next time.
Thanks,
take care.